Hi, Jen. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you on board. Um,
Uh,
for those people who don't know who you are, just give us a bit of background. Tell us a bit about yourself as an athlete, as a coach.
sure. As an athlete, past life. So I started at the Institute of Sport in 1988. I was very young. So I was selected into that, and so I was 8 years old then. Started training, before I was 10, we were already training sort of up to 30 hours a week in the gymnastics program. It's funny, I almost didn't get accepted into it because I was too tall as an 8-year-old. And then they got my parents. Hi, Sherry. Then they got my parents to come into the institute, and they saw they, weren't giants, so I was lucky enough to stay there, and then I just didn't grow. So I trained there. Straight away, you put into an Olympic cycle. So from 88, I was training for the 96 Olympics. Throughout that time, qualified into quite a few Australian teams. I went to Worlds, qualified first for 94 Commonwealths, but unfortunately injured myself before then. Same deal, 95 Worlds, injured myself. So I got to Olympics, so that was good. So I went to Atlanta, retired at the ripe age of 16 after that. And then got back into it in 1998. I applied to some colleges in America and got into a few, but then training started going quite well. So I thought, bugger it, I may as well hang around and trial for Sydney. Training went quite well then. Went to 99 Worlds and then injured myself at Olympic trials. And retired again. So I was 20, and that's long enough to be in a leotard.
Yeah.
After that, I just dabbled in normal stuff for about a year, and then I got sucked into boxing. So I started that just purely for fitness, and then I went to a couple of fight nights, and the little competitive tiger inside kind of came out again. So I did that from about 2004 or 5 up until 2010. So I went to Worlds in 2010. Won my first fight and then got matched up with a 5-time world champ. Got smashed. Retired after that. And then I was introduced shortly after that to the wonderful world of CrossFit. So I started with the guys at Southern in start of 2011. No intention of becoming competitive. I'd done bloody 20 years of competitive sports. But I'll never forget this thing called Opens was mentioned, and Hayden Thornycroft came up to me and said, "You're going to do the Opens?" And I didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, no. Called me a pussy, excuse my language. And I went to a wedding that night, and that just kept going over and over in my head when I was done with small chat with everyone. So I signed up for that, and we got a team into the games that year.
Nice.
So it was very fresh. That was fun. That was absolutely actually one of my highlights of my competitive career.
So your first year of CrossFit, you were a CrossFit Games athlete.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
It was a lovely time to get involved in CrossFit because, if you could bang out a muscle up back then.
It was a big deal.
So I think I came, I could be lying here, 24th or something out of that Opens. And I didn't want to do an individual thing because it just seemed too scary. We did well at regionals. We qualified 3rd and snuck into the games. But
Excellent.
It was incredible. I think I got my first muscle up in the Opens, first time I tried, and I got it. And I have a lot of respect for male gymnasts now that I've actually played on rings because I'd never touched a set of rings ever when I was doing gymnastics. So, yeah.
Talk to us about the coaching you've done since then.
Mm-hmm. I've instructed boxing, a bit of Les Mills stuff back in the day. I've done personal training for, about 15, probably close to 20 years. I'm not doing any at the moment. I got involved in CrossFit Gymnastics 2013. So Tucker got in touch with me and they needed sort of an Australia or Australasian coach. to take the lead with some of that. So I got into the assisting role, and then fairly quickly got bumped up to lead coach. So I travelled around with CrossFit Gymnastics for quite a few years, and I guess that was kind of the push into opening up my own box. So I had Niche for close to 3 years, starting in 2014. And I haven't coached for a couple of years now, so you're getting me very fresh. I'm fresh as a daisy.
Good stuff.
But I'm going to be doing just a few of the CrossFit Gymnastics seminars this year. I guess with the intention of sort of passing the reins over to one of the younger pups, Kyle Holmes.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to do some more coaching.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
It's. I think you come from a background which allows you to be able to both take an outside look at the sport of CrossFit and how people train. Obviously, being a specialist as an athlete at the highest level and as a coach at the highest level as well. In your opinion, as an outsider looking in, and as an insider, what do you think is the biggest thing that CrossFit athletes neglect in their training?
That's easy. Basics. And by basics, and this is coming from a gymnast perspective, you would train at the basics, and that is pretty much core conditioning, general gymnastics, strength training for years. And it's something that you never actually surpass. Like every single day, you would spend minimum an hour, up to 2 hours, doing your basic strength training. That is your foundation. That is your oxygen. And I feel that's a very, very important step that is missed in CrossFit, because, we get exposed to all the videos and the social media stuff of people doing all this fancy stuff. And it's like, I want to be there. I want to do that. And I understand that, because I get sucked up into that too. But you would know, as a coach, without that foundation, you're either going to learn things incorrectly, you're going to stop yourself from being able to progress in your skill development because you've learned things incorrectly. And I found that super frustrating when I had Niche, but I also used that as a tool to make my guys, and I guess I trademarked the respect the process, and I feel like I did make them believe the importance of that. And I also threw in it's my reputation on the line here. So you have to look good when you're competing. You have to point your bloody toes. You have to do it. Because, that's what gymnastics is about. It's perfection. It's training for perfection. How can you do the most amazing skills, but with grace and, that looks incredibly easy and effortless?
I guess it's difficult when you have a sport which is judged, I guess you would say, subjectively to a degree. And you introduce that into a sport which is judged objectively, it becomes really hard, because people just want more reps, more weight, less time, higher scores. And we're trying to introduce elements of a sport where, as you say, you're looking for perfection of movement and perfection of quality, hey?
Yeah. And again, it's hard to get people to wrap their heads around that concept, but that is actually why I love teaching the CrossFit gymnastics stuff, not even just going to different boxes and doing workshops, because it's very easy to give people a very humbling experience by getting them to do some core work. So, I'm a huge fan of isometric work, like just static holds on rings. You got people up there trying to bang out muscle ups and do all this stuff, and they can't hold themselves there for even 10 seconds without having a seizure. Yeah. And it's almost like people have to go through that process. You have to wind them back to make them understand. It's like, all right, I got some steps to pass through before I should think about that, or even change how people think about what's impressive. Like, who can do the slowest muscle up possible? Who can I'm super passionate about that stuff. But if you can get better at those strict movements at the basics, is actually going to make you a more efficient athlete without smashing yourself constantly with trying to, bang out as many reps as you can in a minute. if you get stronger at those basics, that will instantly have an impact on the stuff that you're actually trying to do as a competitive athlete or you're just in your daily wants.
And is that how you would try and convince a CrossFit athlete, again, who's very much outcome driven? Is that how you would convince them that more focused work on just these real basic gymnastic skills?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you're going to convince them that is going to help their higher end stuff? I mean, what would you say to someone who, yes, they have muscle ups, but they haven't got a good hollow position on the ground? How would you convince them that, yes, these basics are important to work your top end skills?
I mean, it's hard to make people try and understand all right, I want to achieve this skill now, but, think of the bigger picture. It is very, very difficult to get people's heads wrapped around that.
Because it's such a long process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As a coach, you shouldn't have to walk the walk, but it did help when I was able to get up there and demonstrate things, with ease or with grace and pointing toes, and then to make people understand the processes that I've kind of gone through to be able to move like that. To be able to just bang out a bar muscle up without ever having done it, because I've trained for years on the basics. I still do my hollow work. If I've got a bloody night shift at work, you'll see me in the office just doing my hollows, because it's how I've been programmed. So CrossFit, I mean, it's an amazing community to work in, because everyone is so passionate and they want to be here 10 days ago. So it's challenging as a coach to try and scale people back. But if you have the ability and the confidence as a coach to, program some of that stuff into warm-ups and make people, kind of sweat bullets doing that, and appreciate that it's very difficult to do that, and consistently implement that into your programming, or just, frequent exposure, and warm-ups is a fabulous time to do that. Eventually they absolutely will see the benefits.
Yeah. It's I think it probably leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask you, because you've talked about how as a top level athlete you trained a lot, and there's a lot of time spent on the basics, and obviously gymnastics, you're training hours and hours and hours a day. A lot of athletes in CrossFit, they don't have the time to devote more and more and more, and because they're doing a lot of work that is having a high impact on their body, people often make the mistake of saying, well, I need to work on my squats, so they add squats. I need to work on my gymnastics, so they add that. I need to work on my swimming, so they add that. And I think that efficient programming isn't so much about how much can we fit in, but how much can we take away. So you've talked about how we can incorporate some of that into warm-ups, where they get that midline conditioning sort of work in their warm-ups. Are there any other strategies you can think of that maybe the people watching or listening to this, are there any things that they can incorporate into their training where they're adding more training, more quality, but they're not adding volume? So they're still doing the same amount of work.
It's the bang for buck type scenario, isn't it? So
exactly.
What stuff can you work on that's going to have the biggest bang for buck? And I mean, when you look at some of the top level CrossFit athletes, especially on in the female ranks, a lot of them have a gymnastics background. So again, they've got that solid foundation. So, stuff that I would say to coaches and athletes in terms of the warm-up exposure, basic gymnastic positioning, which is going to transfer into all of your training, even into your weightlifting. And a lot of that is to do with core strength and stability, because that's obviously the connection between lower body, upper body. Body awareness stuff, again, transfers into your weightlifting. I'd never picked up a bloody barbell before I'd started CrossFit, but I was able to, move my body in a unified sense that allowed me to do okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
With the weights that I lifted.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So I've got two things to say. The core stuff, to me, I'm always going to bang on about that. And in the 2-day gymnastics seminar that we do with CrossFit, we spend basically 2 hours working on core. And people are just smashed at that. And that's where you have to be careful too, in terms of the volume that you do with that, and especially the impact that's going to have on your other training, understanding, the neurological effects that is going to have. But also, spend some time playing.
Yeah.
just like, even if it's just 20 minutes of playtime, like kind of go
See
back
what
to some of
happens.
that childlike, yeah, because you do, and that's where I struggled a little bit as a coach, being a sort of a perfectionist and expecting the best from my athletes, but also kind of giving them that time to play and explore and experiment and being okay if it, didn't look
Perfect.
quite right.
Yeah.
That's also how you learn
Yeah.
and that's how you evolve. So as long as you've got that balance between the basics, that's when, I expect everything to be spot on.
Mm-hmm.
And then all right, go and do your thing.
Yeah. I think it's important to have that structure and that routine, but there is a lot to be said for having areas that are grey areas built into that structure and routine where we say, all right, you're going to go and work on something like X, Y, Z. Just go and play with it. Let's see what happens. And not over-coaching people, but letting them build that body awareness themselves.
Yeah, and that is something that I really had to check myself on quite a bit. I'd still pull them up if they looked like a sloppy whatever. As long as they were safe, then, go for it.
Cool. So you've spent time around top-level gymnasts, being one yourself, and top-level CrossFitters, being one yourself. Do you think there's a single lesson that CrossFitters in general could learn from top-level gymnasts? So if there's a habit or a routine or something that a top-level Olympic world standard gymnast would do that a CrossFitter could take on board, like if there was a single thing, what would it be?
Oh, I feel like I'm being very repetitive. Static work.
Cool.
Again, that's one of those bang for buck. Especially when you're talking about a dynamic apparatus like rings. I feel if people valued that, I guess, specific training more, it would have huge benefits on their body and their safety and, preventing injuries, but also on their skill development.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take a lot of time. If you were able to, for example, bang out a Tabata set of your dip support holds on rings or something, like you're doing pretty well. And there's not many people who'd be able to do that, focusing on their external rotation and elbows locked out. And that's something that, I really hammer in when I'm doing the CrossFit Gymnastics seminars. It's like that straight arm strength, which is very foreign to a lot of CrossFit athletes, but it's absolutely essential in gymnastics, especially male gymnastics. And we don't train that sort of stuff because we're so strong and we just want to, muscle everything, but being able to actually extend your joints and Yeah.
I think it's good. I mean, you've said you feel like you're being repetitive, but what it tells us and how it comes across is this is the important stuff and this is the low-hanging fruit. This is the 20% of work that's going to give the 80% of the results. So the fact that you are being repetitive, I mean, cliches are cliches for a reason, aren't they? Because they're true.
Yeah.
So,
but it's the stuff that I can feel myself, I get so passionate about it. It's because I know that it has the biggest impact. So as a coach, you need to make people believe that. Again, by doing it yourself, by believing in it, and then how do we transfer that into our athletes? Awareness, knowledge, and then actually doing it, and then them seeing the benefits of that. And again, it's not something that's going to happen in a week, 2 weeks. It's long term. So, teaching your athletes to be patient, but having the confidence in yourself to keep on their back with it. Even if it means you program stuff for them to do at home, and then it's their responsibility. They need to take ownership for it. It's so important. It's so important.
Cool, I love it. Let's take a little bit of a change of directions. Obviously, you've competed at the CrossFit Games. If you were going to design an event for the CrossFit Games using your area of specialisation, using your background, obviously, they're starting to introduce some more gymnastic sort of stuff, but it's still ultra basic, ultra simple based on the sort of stuff that you've been exposed to. If you were going to design an event for the CrossFit Games to test the best on earth, what would that event look like?
Static. I would do some static or isometric tests. So, we've seen heaps of handstand walking. Now we're seeing handstand walking over obstacles. I would like to see a handstand hold, because that's straight away going to tell you that people, they're not breathing upside down, so they actually can't hold a handstand. Their positioning, they can get away with it when they're walking.
Yeah, you can hide it, can't you?
Absolutely, So static hold on rings, static handstand hold and strict freestanding handstand push-up if you want to be fancy. That's
Yes.
cool.
Cool.
And, that certainly is going to teach people in terms of those standards that everyone always complains about, blah, 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 about handstand push-ups in opens. You can't do that if you're coming off the wall, So, and that's where it's like train more than the standards. Like, when you're doing your pull-ups, chin over the bar, don't do that. Like, learn how to pull the whole way. I would no-rep my guys for doing that because I want them to actually do the skill properly so it transfers to the higher level skill.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing with it's almost the thing with gymnastics is everything is a means to an end. All the work you're doing is not doing hollow holds to get better at hollow holds.
No.
You're doing hollow holds for something else. And
exactly.
And it's hard to get that through the mentality of a lot of people involved in this CrossFit area. Is that the focus is on, I want to do muscle ups to get better at muscle ups. I want to do my kipping handstand push-ups to get better at kipping handstand push-ups. But there's a lot of preliminary stuff we need to do before we can get them there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, and we should be talking the long term and, how long do people want to be doing CrossFit? Fair enough, their competitive career might not go on decades and decades, but they should want to do this style of training for a very long time. So
to stay healthy as well.
What's the rush?
Yeah. Anything that we haven't touched on, Jen, that you'd like to cover?
Oh, God, hollow holds, no, I've done that. Isometrics.
Just work the basics, hey?
Hey?
Just work the basics, hey?
The basics, yeah. And it doesn't, what you mentioned before about people just wanting to layer upon layer upon layer with all this extra stuff that, they might see at the games or stuff that's coming up in competitions or swimming, blah, blah, blah. But this stuff doesn't take long. Literally, if you can bang out 5 minutes of core work, like 5 minutes, the impact that will have if you do it consistently will be massive over time.
Right.
It's not, I'm not asking you to, do an extra half an hour per session. Absolutely not. And that's stuff that you can do when you're watching, Love Island or whatever people watch. Because I don't watch that.
Of course not. Now, we are lucky enough to have you re-entering the coaching ring for us over the weekend of our athlete camp in September 2018. What can our attendees, what can the CrossFitters who will be coming along expect? You're running a few modules for us. What can they expect to take away?
Yes. Well, I've also invited along Kyle Holmes, who will be assisting me with the CrossFit Gymnastics stuff. And he's one of he's the up-and-coming young pup. So he's going to be my demo monkey.
Excellent.
And he'll also be taking people through some of the muscle-up stuff. So we're going to start with, surprise, surprise, some core work, just so people really understand what their core is and how it translates into their other skills, gymnastics, and also, other movements that we would come across in CrossFit, so that we learn to use our body as one unified machine. We're going to work on looking good upside down, so positioning and balance with your handstands. And also, teaching people how to spot each other, so you're not always relying on the wall. We are going to do some muscle-up drills, so bar muscle-up drills, and I think I've entitled that "How to Take the Muscle Out of Your Bar Muscle-Ups," because it shouldn't actually be an extremely muscle skill. We want to be able to swing our asses up there, looking good with grace pointers. And then just basic ring strength training. Not fancy stuff, but but important, more important than working on your muscle ups or your kipping dips or whatever. Yeah, that's
so. It's basically it's a practical version of all the foundations that you've talked us through over the last 30 minutes.
Of course.
Love it.
Yes.
Love it. Okay, before we say goodbye to you for today, Jen, any way that people can get in touch with you with questions? How can they find you online? Anywhere that we would like to send people?
Who am I? On Instagram. I'm Jen Smith with dots in between each letter because there's lots of Jen Smiths around.
There's only one Jen Smith.
There you go. That's probably the easiest way. I put up some random videos every now and then. But no, I'm really, even just like talking about this stuff with you, I feel like I haven't kind of vented with that for a while. So I'm already like, ugh, I'm on my mission. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into some coaching, and we'll have fabulous fun.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Jen. We really appreciate it.
No worries.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
mate.